You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Monday, January 29th, 2018, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us here for another week, and the last week that we will be doing daily podcasts here at the Marijuana Agenda. Starting this Wednesday, my 50th birthday, we're going to ratchet it back to just being a weekly podcast, as I've been podcasting for 10 years now, and boy, I'm telling you, my arms are tired. No, old joke. But looking forward to the 50th birthday, which I understand I share with the head coach of the Super Bowl participant team from the National Football Conference, Philadelphia Eagles head coach Doug Peterson. Yes, head coach Doug Peterson and I are born on the exact same day, January 31st, 1968. So coming up this Wednesday, a special birthday edition of the Marijuana Agenda. We're going to do some flashbacks to the past and kind of look through the history of this podcast and my involvement with it. So stay tuned for that. But coming up on today's show, we've got plenty of marijuana news to bring to you, beginning with the shocking development from the Democratic Party, which, man, it's almost like you think they want to try to lose elections. They have named one of the most anti-pot Democrats to give the Democratic response to President Trump's first State of the Union address that's happening tomorrow. So we'll tell you all about that thanks to our friends at Marijuana Moment. Also coming up on the show today, we're going to take a look at or listen to new audio from Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, where he was speaking to the Drug Enforcement Administration and ratcheting up his rhetoric and love for his long-forgotten 1980s drug war. He wants to bring back Just Say No. We got some audio from him, as well as some audio a couple days ago from Donald Trump that shows you why we have reason to be a little bit scared. And then coming up at the end of the program, some drug war data mining, where I take on that 1980s drug war rhetoric and another anti-marijuana legalization group that thinks the 1980s is something we should aspire to. I got the charts and graphs to show you why that's a mistake. But first, let's get to the news.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Monday, January 29th, 2018. I'm Russ Belville. Congressman Joe Kennedy III of Massachusetts, who voted to allow the DEA to raid medical marijuana states, will deliver the official Democratic response to President Trump's State of the Union address. Marijuana Moment reports that in 2015, Kennedy was one of just 10 House Democrats to vote against a measure to protect medical cannabis patients and providers who are following state laws from being prosecuted by the federal government. He was one of just 24 Democrats to vote the same day against a broader measure blocking the Justice Department from interfering with all state marijuana laws, including those allowing recreational use. 67 Republicans supported the medical cannabis measure that Kennedy opposed, and 45 GOP members supported the broader marijuana measure. Kennedy also voted 3 times against amendments to increase military veterans' access to medical cannabis, just one of 5 Democrats to oppose that measure in 2016. 57 Republicans voted for it that year. Kennedy also opposed a very limited proposal to protect children who use non-psychoactive cannabidiol extracts to treat severe seizure disorders from being targeted by the DEA. That amendment was supported by 118 Republicans. Kennedy is a relative of former Representative Patrick Kennedy of Rhode Island, who co-founded the leading anti-legalization organization, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. The Food and Drug Administration is taking public comments on recommendations by the World Health Organization that cannabidiol should not be scheduled under international conventions. Quote, CBD is not specifically listed in the schedules of the 1961, 1971, or 1988 International Drug Control Conventions, the FDA writes. However, CBD is produced for pharmaceutical purposes as an extract of cannabis, and cannabis extracts and tinctures are included in the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs of 1961. The FDA will also be taking comment on the regulation of several synthetic cannabinoids. The public comment period ends February 26th. Comments can be submitted online using the short URL rad-r.us/FDA CBD comment. The Trump administration is following through on its promise to use more private contract prisons, with the Justice Department seeking to identify inmates to transfer out of government-owned facilities and to cut federal guard positions. The Bureau of Prisons has the stated goal of, quote, increasing population levels in private contract facilities, end quote, according to a memorandum sent by the agency's Assistant Director for Correctional Programs Division, Frank Lara, on Wednesday, and obtained by government executive. In Wednesday's memo, Lara tasked facility leaders with identifying inmates to transfer to private contract prisons, saying it would, quote, alleviate the overcrowding at Bureau of Prisons institutions and maximize the effectiveness of private contracts, end quote. Lara laid out certain criteria for determining which inmates should be transferred, such as those designated low security and those having 90 months or less remaining on their sentence. A Florida judge has ruled that a lawsuit against the state's decision to ban smokable forms of medical marijuana can proceed. Leon County Judge Karen Gievers ruled on Friday that 3 patients suing the state can proceed because their claims that the ban impacts them are sufficient. Gievers dismissed the motion by People United for Medical Marijuana, which is the committee formed by Orlando attorney John Morgan, because it lacks sufficient grounds. The organization has 10 days to file an amended lawsuit. Morgan spearheaded the 2016 state constitutional amendment making medical marijuana legal, which was approved by 71% of Florida voters. The state legislature banned smoking in last year's bill signed by Governor Rick Scott, saying it isn't healthy. The law does allow for vaping, edibles, oils, sprays, or tinctures. Dennis Perrone, an activist who helped legalize medical marijuana in California, died Saturday afternoon in a San Francisco hospital. He was 71. Perrone was a force behind a San Francisco ordinance allowing medical marijuana, a win that later helped propel the 1996 passage of Prop 215, which legalized medical use for the entire state. A Vietnam War veteran, Perrone spent some of the last years of his life on a 20-acre farm in the rolling hills of Lake County, growing and giving away what he once sold, medical marijuana. Throughout his long and checkered career, Perrone was a gay activist, pot enthusiast, and sometimes vigilante at odds with the law. He was among the first to argue for the benefits of medicinal marijuana for AIDS patients as the health crisis overtook San Francisco. The epidemic also took his partner, Jonathan West, in 1990. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Monday, January 29th, 2018.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Now that California has legalized recreational marijuana, you need to get the latest expertise on the rules and regulations governing this multi-billion-dollar market. The International Cannabis Business Conference is the longest-running event of its kind in California. Join us at the Hyatt Regency San Francisco for the 4th annual ICBC and the first conference in California after legalization. You'll be treated to focused presentations from California's top industry experts, featuring the head of California's Cannabis Commission, Lori Ajax. At the VIP reception, you'll have the chance to meet marijuana legend and new cannabis entrepreneur Tommy Chong. After the conference, you'll be treated to a VIP after-party featuring DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill. It's the International Cannabis Business Conference in San Francisco, February 1st and 2nd at the Hyatt Regency. Visit internationalcbc.com for details. Make sure you log on to internationalcbc.com for your tickets to California's first marijuana business conference under legalization.
The Marijuana Agenda. Like the gay agenda, only with better music.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta 9 House.
Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
People should say no to drug use.
It's really, really easy.
Adding more gasoline to the fire.
Lackadaisical. Really tough, really big, really great.
To infect and rot our nation from within.
Dangerous gateway drugs.
We don't need to be legalizing marijuana.
To build and grow a stronger, healthier, and drug-free society.
In the news.
Today in What in the News, we have some new audio from Attorney General Jeff Sessions as he was speaking to members of the Drug Enforcement Administration. And it brings to mind the past few months, actually over a year now, when I've been telling people that we need to be wary of the severe possibility, the extreme possibility that we're going to get some sort of law enforcement action from the Sessions Department of Justice against marijuana consumers, the medical marijuana industry, the marijuana industry in general. And I keep getting told, don't worry about it. Nothing's happening. There's no way they'd stop the money train. Trump is a businessman. The genie's out of the bottle. He can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's impossible to stop the marijuana train from rolling downhill at this point. And to some extent, I agree with that in that I don't think we'll go back to having majority approval for locking people up for marijuana. But when it comes to shaping what the industry will be and how open it will be, how much it will be like alcohol or tobacco, or how much it will be severely restricted and barcoded and limited, has a lot to do with the battles we fight over these next 5 years. And Attorney General Sessions is a dyed-in-the-wool, 100% true believer in the 1980s drug war. He longs for it. He pines for the 1980s, the just say no era. And I think that when these guys are nation's top law enforcement official and the president of the United States, the commander in chief, are talking about the drug war in wistful terms, in longing terms, wanting to bring that back, praising brutal regimes like Duterte in the Philippines, it's time for us to take notice and really begin to think about how we're going to stand against this and what concrete steps we need to take to ensure that we remain free and that our industry and our freedom can grow. So let me get to the audio. Let me play this for you. This is Attorney General Sessions speaking just recently on the drug war. And he's talking about how it's become out of fashion lately, since the past administration. It's become out of fashion to want to police the drug war, want to lock people up. It's become unpopular. There's all this legal support for legalizing marijuana, and there's all this opposition to the drug war. And Sessions is upset about it, and he's trying to raise the spirits of these DEA recruits to let them know how important they are. It just gives me chills listening to it. Here's the clip.
In recent years, you've heard and felt that there's been erosion of support for the anti-drug law enforcement agenda. It's been in Congress sometimes, in state legislatures, and even among the general public. One law enforcement professional told me that he felt disappointed that the government officials didn't understand the importance of our work. Resources have been redirected and not in the right direction sometimes, I think. People have often forgotten that the middle word in your title is enforcement. Resources have not been what we need them to be. What has been the result of this over a period of years? We saw drug purity up, availability of drugs up, and drug prices down. 3 bad trends in this country. We saw addiction up and death up to a degree this nation has never seen before. 64,000 people in 16 died of drug overdose deaths. We expect those numbers to be slightly up this year, but not as much as the 20+% in 2016.
Yeah. Back to the future there, Jeff. This is a typical Jeff Sessions rhetoric, and a lot of it is just untrue, or it's true, but the way he's framing it is irrelevant. For example, he says the drug purity is up, the drug price is down. Drug purity and availability is up, drug price is down. That's been pretty consistent for the past 40 years. The longer we continue prohibition, the purer drugs get. Price per pure gram goes down. That's not a pro-drug war, anti-drug war, whether we do it a lot, whether we legalize. Doesn't matter. The drugs get more pure the more we continue prohibition. The other aspect of what he was saying there, having to do with 64,000 opioid deaths. Yeah, that's opioids. That's the pharmaceutical drugs. That's been fostered by our pharmaceutical industry through advertising, through overprescribing of opiates. We got 5% of the world's population. We consume 30% of the world's opioids. There's just something wrong going here. There's some sort of decay, some sort of pain that's being unaddressed among the American population. And then he directly links this. He directly says, basically, that since we stopped fighting the 1980s drug war, we've seen all these terrible harms increase. And I'm going to dig into that a little deeper in the next segment, but I think it's important to understand that when it comes to this drug war stuff, a lot of times we get into conspiratorial thinking, right? Oh, he's guarding the pharmaceutical, he's a shill for the pharmaceutical complex. He's just trying to protect the private prison industry. They're just trying to, we have all these like they're masterminds that are planning this. And sometimes I think we give short shrift to the idea that they actually believe this shit. They actually believe that drug abuse, drug use is going to cause the downfall of civilization. And that the only proper way to deal with that is through tough love, is through punishment and carceral remedies. They really believe it. They're not bad guys. They're not twirling their cartoon mustaches. They think they're doing good. They're do-gooders. They want to save America, and they think this is about saving America. And if it's not scary enough coming from the Attorney General, listen to it coming from the Commander-in-Chief. This was Donald Trump just a few days ago.
And we're partnering with communities to end the scourge of drug addiction that has plagued our country. I mean, you talk about a problem. That's a problem that we are working very hard on. Pam has worked very hard. Everybody here, even if they're not totally involved with that, they're all working hard on it. And some people within the family themselves, unfortunately, they're really working because they have people within the family that are in trouble. So that's number one on our list. If you look at what's gone on, there's never been a time like this. And it's a worldwide problem. Some areas take care of it through very, very tough measures. We don't. We're not prepared to do that, I guess they say, as a country. But we have a tremendous, massive drug problem and drug population, and we have dealers all over the country, and we are hitting them hard, the dealers. The dealers are being hit hard, but what they've done to families and what they're doing to the country, and it's something that we are very focused on. Whether it's the opioids, whether it's drugs, as you hear in the traditional sense, much comes through the southern border. You know that. People don't like to talk about it. They say, oh, why do you mention that? Because it happens to be true. And frankly, the tougher we get, the better it's going to be, the faster it's going to go away. We have got to get really tough on that problem because it's eating away at the heart of our country.
The tougher we get, the faster it's going to go away. And I think the most chilling part of that quote for me is when Trump is going on and says, well, we're not ready as a country, they say, I guess, to get harsh on drugs. They say, I guess. Like, that to me says that Trump's ready to do it. He's ready to do it. He's ready to get tough. He's ready to start sending in DEA agents for raids. He's ready to start locking people up, doing sweeps. He's ready to do it. But someone else is kind of holding them back. Somebody's saying, oh, well, they're not ready for it. It'd distract from the rest of your agenda, whatever excuse they might be giving them. But this is definitely something that's on their mind. And keep in mind as well that part of this has to do with an agenda of distracting people from what's going on in other ways that they're being attacked. We've got a midterm election coming up in 2018, congressional elections. And these culture war issues, these get tough on drugs types of issues. I know a lot of people keep saying, oh, well, we got 60% support for marijuana legalization nationwide. We got 93% for medical. Yeah, but you can still go to places in the middle of the country and their support for legalization is not at majority levels. Their support for maintaining punishment for people that use and cultivate cannabis is still in the majority. And if they're trying to turn out as many of those votes as they can, this tough on crime message could be the thing that drives people to the polls. It's up to us to make sure we win this election.
Well, what the hell are we supposed to do, you moron?
You're supposed to register. You're supposed to vote. And please, please, please vote for Democrats. At least in the congressional and Senate election, right? For your mayor, for your governor, for your city councilman, for your county commissioner, for your judge, I don't care. Pick the eighth party. I don't care. But for this 2018 election, if the Congress doesn't flip to the Democrats, it's going to be a hell next 2 years of Trump after that.
If you work in the cannabis industry, consume marijuana, or just support freedom, you need to know about breaking policy news that affects you. Marijuana Moment is the daily newsletter that helps you stay on top of all the latest and most important state, federal, and international cannabis developments. Brought to you by longtime legalization activist Tom Angel, Marijuana Moment puts a concise yet comprehensive overview of cannabis news in your inbox early every weekday morning. Wake up to Marijuana Moment and rest assured you'll be ready for the cannabis news that's driving the day. Subscribe now at marijuanamoment.net.
You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
We've turned the corner on drug addiction in the United States. Drug addiction in the United States is under control.
Okay, maybe you're a little high. The Marijuana Agenda is a listener-supported independent podcast brought to you by Radical Russ Media, LLC. Subscribe to our VIP feed at mjagenda.com for access to our ad-free podcast segment archive. Make a one-time donation to support the Marijuana Agenda at paypal.me/radicalruss. Now, in the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Marijuana Agenda presents this anti-drug public service announcement.
Well, there's this girl on my block. Every time I see her, she asks me to get high. And every time I tell her that I'm not into that. She says all the kids are doing it. If that's true, then why doesn't she find someone else to do it with?
This has been an actual anti-drug public service announcement. To combat this and other drug war hysteria, listen to the Marijuana Agenda every weekday at 3 p.m. Pacific at live.mjagenda.com or download the free podcast at mjagenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
And one of the parts of the American dream is we're going to come down very, very hard on this massive drug problem.
Okay, maybe you're a little high.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
In the last segment, we talked about Jeff Sessions and his pining for the 1980s Just Say No drug war of the Nancy Reagan era. And this is a subject that came up over the weekend as well on my blog at radicalruss.com, where I've been trolling one of the anti-pot prohibitionists lately. They're a account called Pop Pot Group. It's at Pop Pot Group, and it's the social media feed for a group called Parents Opposed to Pot. Yeah, I know that pop pot parents means it's parents opposed to pot. Nobody ever said they're clever. But anyway, the subject of the Nancy Reagan Just Say No 1980s came up, and they're just yearning for this magical time when, we say it came so close to stopping everyone from using drugs until that nasty pothead Bill Clinton ruined everything. And I had pointed out to the pot people in a tweet that in 1979, 60.4% of U.S. high school seniors had tried marijuana in their lifetime. 36.5% used monthly. In 2013, the lifetime stats 45.5 and 22.9 for the monthly. In 2016, after 4 legal states, the stats are 44.5 lifetime and 22.5 monthly. And they responded, this is the Pop Pot Group, that's why the parent movement was formed. A parent movement formed after legalization. The trend continued downward until 1992. Just like Pop Pot and Smart Colorado, we work night and day to stop this. They haven't solved the problem, but they're educating in earnest. And what they're referring to for younger listeners and folks that maybe you don't know the drug war history, when the increase in the public acceptance of cannabis use rose throughout the late 1970s, disco era, and drugs, even drugs, cocaine and other drugs Quaaludes were considered, party drugs. There was a backlash to that. It happened in the early 1980s with the election of Ronald Reagan and his so-called silent majority, the moral majority and the rest of these Christian evangelicals, and a parents' movement against drug use. It was I can't remember the woman's name, but she got on TV and she's got the gas mask bong and she's trying to frighten the hell out of everybody. So what I was trying to point out is that even then, even when it was at its worst, at least from their point of view, what worst would be when 60% of high school seniors had tried pot, was we saw so many more kids trying it and using it in 1979, and yet the sky didn't fall. Somehow those teens grew up and became adults in the 1980s and 1990s with no real appreciable deficit in their abilities. But for these pop pot people, this is how they see the drug war. They see it as the success in getting people to stop using marijuana or drugs in general. And to be sure, let me throw some graphics up on the screen, because to be sure, the reported use of marijuana by teens did decline pretty fast throughout the 1980s. If you look at the chart, the blue line that you see is the monthly use by 12th graders, and they only measured that from 7 all the way back to 76. For 8th graders and 10th graders, the 10th graders is the yellow line, 8th graders is the red line. They started measuring that in 91, right? So that's why those lines don't start until the middle of the chart. But as you look at that 12th grade line, it got as high as 37.1% using monthly, over a third. And that dropped all the way down to 1992's low of 11.9. We went from a third of high school seniors using marijuana monthly to an eighth of high school seniors using monthly. And that wasn't just a decline in the use of marijuana. There was also a decline seen in the use of drugs that aren't marijuana. This is a chart that's got the same blue, yellow, and red lines, right, for the seniors, 10th graders, 8th graders. But this is the drugs other than marijuana. And it spiked as high as 21.7% in the early 1980s, like 82, I think that was. Dropped all the way down to 6.3% when you get to 1992. So this is what these folks look at, these pop pot people, the John Walters and the Jeff Sessions and all these prohibitionists say, look, 1980s, get tough on drugs, just say no. Look what happened. So many fewer people reported using drugs. And I think it's important that we emphasize reported using drugs. There's no test on whether or not these people are lying or not. And you got to remember, this is the percentage of people were willing to answer the phone and talk to a stranger representing the federal government and give truthful answers as to whether or not they are currently in violation of state and federal drug laws. So when that line went way down, was that really just a bunch of people clamming up because suddenly the 1980s got all sort of Gestapo on us and we said, well, we ain't saying shit about our drug use? Maybe a little. Maybe some of that decline is people just shutting up. And you also have to look at these people, these pot people, and they want to crow about the reduction in the use of marijuana and other drugs. But then, what is the cost of that? That just didn't happen. There were policies behind that. And they're focusing on this declining teen use of drugs without considering any of these costs that we had in the 1980s to achieve these results. And the most glaring of these costs came in the form of the United States becoming the all-time global leader in imprisoning its own citizens. This is a chart from the Prison Policy Initiative. Over 1 million drug possession arrests every year. The dark orange bars are the possession. Light yellow bars are the sales and manufacturing. They're stacked, so you get the total. And you can see the beginning of that chart, 1980, running through the 90s and all the way through the early 2000s, goes up and up and up. We've become the global leader, the all-time global leader in imprisoning our own citizens. During Reagan's 2 terms as president, the United States more than doubled the people arrested for drug crimes, corresponding to that decline in the reported teen drug use we saw. So sure, if you want to lock a bunch of people up, pack prisons full to the gills, you might be able to make some dent in how many teenagers use drugs. But when we move on into the 1990s, this is where their analogy falls apart. They like to say, Reagan and Bush, drug warrior Republicans, tough on crime, just say no. And boom, we saw those rates decrease. But once we got to 1992, Bill Clinton was just as much a lock-em-up drug warrior as Reagan ever was. Marijuana arrests doubled under Bill Clinton's 2 terms. Drug arrests overall increased by half. And yet, those earlier charts of drug use showed that marijuana and drug use kind of leveled off at that point. We see the rates of non-marijuana drug use starting in Bill Clinton's term, 1992 at the beginning of this chart. The different colors, dark blue is cocaine, light blue, hallucinogens, red is inhalants, green is heroin. Despite being tough on drugs, despite arresting twice as many people for weed, despite Bill Clinton's crime bill that put 100,000 more cops on the street, the use of drugs other than marijuana by people aged 12 and older pretty much stayed the same or went up. Gets worse when you look at, worse or better, depending on your perspective, the use of marijuana. We look at the use of marijuana over that span of time. This looks back to 1988. Bill Clinton comes in around 1992, and we see rates of marijuana use going up. Now, remember, during this time, 1990s, Bill Clinton is doubling the number of arrests for people for marijuana. This is the lifetime rate is your top green line. Your next green line is the annual rate. Your bottom line is the monthly rate. Annual rate hovering around 10% for 2 decades. Monthly rate hovering around 6% for 2 decades. No matter how many people they locked up, no matter how many cops they put on the street. Overall drug use and marijuana use increased in Clinton's first term. And by the end of his first term, they've leveled off and held steady for the most part until you get to the most recent increase with opiate abuse. But these policies have a cost. As we said, it's made us the world's largest jailer. These policies from the 1980s, like mandatory minimum sentencing and 3 strikes and you're outlaws, they did seem to drive down reported drug use in the 1980s. But that effect kind of faded in the 90s, even as the prison population continued to grow and grow. So now we're saddled with not just the largest prison population in the world, not just on a per capita basis, but overall. We have roughly 320 million citizens, and 2.3 million of them are locked up. China has 1.4 billion people, and they imprison 1.5 million of them. That means for every 100,000 citizens, China's locking up about 118 of them, while we're locking up about 718 of them. Only Russia comes close to our per capita rate. They're locking up about 615 of their citizens per 100,000. Now look, nobody wants to see teenagers abusing drugs. However, no matter what policies we enact, from open markets all the way to the death penalty, there will always be a non-zero number of teenagers who do find access to and abuse drugs. Now, we should aim our public policy to reduce teen use, certainly. We've seen that these punitive carceral policies that ban drug use can have some success at reducing that number, but we've also seen that such policies come with a cost at becoming the world's greatest jailer. I believe the goal should be to tightly regulate, not ban, tightly regulate adult use of drugs and set those policies in search of the sweet spot, where the fewest teens using drugs meets the least unintended cost to society. And I think the proof of this concept can be found in the two drugs that are the most addictive and cost the most harm to user in society, alcohol and tobacco. Since the end of Reagan's second term, this is the latest chart. Again, 12th graders are blue, 10th graders are yellow, 8th graders are red. This is monthly cigarette use by teenagers. Or, sorry, monthly alcohol use by teenagers, excuse me. Since the end of Reagan's second term, we saw an incredible decline in the reported use of alcohol by teens. When I was in high school in the 1980s, at least 2/3 of seniors had tried booze. For today's seniors, that number is down to 1/3. And then when it comes to cigarettes, we've seen an even greater decline. Since the end of Reagan's second term, we saw an incredible decline in the since the beginning of Clinton's second term, we saw an incredible decline in the reported use of cigarettes by teens. When my little brother was in high school in the 90s, over 1/3 of seniors had tried smoking. For today's seniors, that number's down to 1/8. But with neither of those drugs did we declare an absolute prohibition and begin ticketing and fining and arresting and jailing the adults who use those drugs. Instead, we shaped public policy to address the problem of teen use. Not adult use, teen use. With booze, Reagan blackmailed the states into raising their drinking ages to 21. Groups like Mothers Against Drunk Driving began factual public service education campaigns, and laws were written to hold servers of alcohol more responsible for checking IDs. With tobacco, attorneys general from most of the states sued the tobacco companies. New laws were written to put smokes behind locked counters and require better carding of kids. Tobacco advertising that targeted kids through cartoon mascots, sports sponsorships, and candy versions of their products was banned. And another hidden cost of drug prohibition comes from the crime that's created when adults wish to purchase their drug. That leads to violent criminals, corrupted police who terrorize neighborhoods, and cowed populations too afraid to snitch when they see real crime happening. Those elements lead to poorer educational and occupational opportunities for those affected communities, and that bogs down our whole society. These groups like Pop Pot want to reduce the harm for drug use by eliminating drug use through punitive sanctions, which always results in continued drug use with more potent drugs and the unintended consequence of the punitive sanctions. People like me want to reduce the harm from drug use by addressing the harm, not the use. And we've proven that by alcohol and tobacco. We've proven that to be the correct strategy.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
For everyone here at Delta 9 House and Studios, I'm Radical Russ Belville. Thanks for joining me. Check out my writing on radicalruss.com. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down.